Homage to the Triple Gem. So, warm greetings everybody, this is Bhante Joe, and I've actually come down here to Gendagala Aranya, which is has quite a lot of beauty to it, this Aranya, and is not very well known. So actually just myself and one other monk are here, and have been enjoying it so far. Actually, he's going to leave in a couple of months, and then I'll be here alone, have the whole Aranya to myself. And so was asked a question about a week and a half ago about practicing as a layperson. And basically the question was, how can one recognize the kind of subtle attachments that one has, or subtle habits one has as a layperson, and basically learn to overcome them or renounce them. So one of the things about practicing meditation in general, or Buddhist practice in general, is that the Buddha compares it basically to like a Fletcher shaping wood. So this is one way you can look at it, like a Fletcher, like kind of gradually shaping the shaft of a arrow or so. I think that's the metaphor. You can compare it to something like that, like carpentry or whittling, where one basically starts off with like a large block of wood. And at first one is basically just concerned with the outlines of the shape that one wants to make. One has an idea of the shape that one wants to make. But at the outset, one carves away the roughest pieces so that one gets an idea of the rough shape that one wants to create. So at the very outset, it involves kind of lopping off like large portions of this block. So like large portions of the block of wood will come off. Kind of, if you want to make a figure of a human, then it's not going to be a diamond shape per se. It might be kind of a little like this, kind of a little bit bell shaped at first, kind of with the shoulders and the knees, these kind of things. So at the very outset, one will start with this block of wood and one will lop off like large portions of this block of wood. And in a similar way, when one first starts to practice, either as a layperson or a monk, the most gross defilements that one cuts off, they're like these, or you say like attachments or habits one cuts off. These are like these large pieces of the block of wood that one lops off or cuts off. So they can fall away quite large portions of one's unskillful behavior. One's life can fall away at the outset, like these kind of big lops off the block. So this can be things like drinking, doing drugs or alcohol, or partying, or one parties. These kind of changes that one makes in one's life are actually quite significant sometimes. They have a very large impact on the way that one lives one's life. However, these kind of large lops off of the block, they sometimes don't have the most significant impact in terms of creating the figure that one wants to create, in terms of giving it beauty or depth or expression, in terms of making it into a work of art, in terms of making it something significant. It just lops off a lot, and now the block doesn't look like a big square block of wood, or just a tree branch or something. It now has a rough shape. So first one wants to identify in one's life what are the areas in which one is actually breaking the precepts. In which ways is one actually not keeping the 5 precepts? If one is stealing, if one is lying, if one is killing, if one is not faithful to one's partner, and if one is taking intoxicants, then these are things that are, like that one wants to cut off, in terms of that are like these large chops off the block of wood. That will significantly alter one's life. So oftentimes these types of things are things that people overlook and they don't pay much attention to, and they want to go straight to the refining of the block of wood, straight to carving out the eyebrows and carving out all the little hairs, because that seems more important. But if you do that, you end up with maybe like a 2D figure that's that's not well shaped. You start carving the eyebrows before you have the shape of the block, then you actually don't end up with a sculpt. You don't end up with a sculpted piece of wood. You might end up with like a drawing, which is not the complete picture and won't give the desired effect. So the first thing one wants to do is evaluate in terms of these gross defilements in one's mind. Does one have these things or not? Is one breaking the 5 precepts or not? And this doesn't mean like one breaks them from time to time. It means one stops breaking them, period. It doesn't mean it's okay if one breaks them from time to time. That's another thing that can kind of come up in people's life, is they think, well, I only tell lies from time to time, and it's a white lie. But that telling of the lie from time to time, that's a gross defilement, a gross habit that will block one's progress, even if one tries to do these more refined things, eliminate the more refined habits, bad habits that are causing one to suffer, that are blocking one's progress in meditation. So first of all, one wants to make sure that these 5 precepts are basically something that's ingrained in one's way of life, and one wants to practice them until they become something that's almost like ingrained in one's character, something that becomes a default habit, so that one really doesn't want to do it. One doesn't even want to think about doing it, really. So one wants to ideally train one's mind until these thoughts basically don't arise. I mean, this is the way that habits tend to work. When one pursues a particular line of thinking, when it becomes habitual, then it becomes second nature. One doesn't need to think about maintaining it. So one wants to have these 5 precepts firmly established, firmly guarded as a part of one's character, as a part of one's basic way of going through the world. And this is like lopping off the gross portions of the block, if one is carving this block. So there's other more refined things that the Buddha recommends after that. I mean, one wants to make sure as well that one is basically that one has a good livelihood, and one is not doesn't have a livelihood as a layperson where one is engaging in trade with like liquor or human beings or living beings or meat or poison, weapons, these kind of things. These types of livelihood, if one is doing that for 8 hours a day, although one can do these types of livelihood actually without breaking the 5 precepts. I mean, you can sell somebody a gun, or you can you can sell like rat poison without you actually giving the rat the poison or telling people to give the rat the poison and having them give it. So this is actually, you could do that and not be breaking the 5 precepts. I mean, you could be stoking people's desires for products that they don't need and still not be breaking the 5 precepts. And there's kind of interesting, there's an interesting sutta, a couple of interesting suttas where the Buddha is approached by a professional warrior, that's one, and another one where he's actually approached by an actor. And the actor says, in our lineage, we're taught that that basically actors go to the heaven of laughing gods. Is that true? And he asks the Buddha 3 times. The Buddha refuses to answer, and finally says, well, basically, since I can't get it past you, I'm paraphrasing, then I'll tell you, actors don't go to the heaven of laughter. They go to the hell of laughter if they've spent their career, their life as an actor. And he says, why is that? It's because people who have desire, aversion, and delusion focus on these things more when an actor presents them on a stage than if they hadn't seen this play at all. So essentially what an actor is doing is they're stoking these emotions in people. And generally they're negative emotions. Generally they're deluded. They're stories that have, have an association with reality, have an association with principles that are popular in a culture. But the story is quite often fictional. And even if it's non-fictional, then the actors are generally trying to rouse these emotions in people, trying to rouse their desire, their aversion, their delusion. That's actually what makes movies kind of fun to watch in a way. I guess if it was a non-fiction movie about giving dana that was encouraging people to give dana, then that would be a totally different story. That'd probably be wholesome. But actually the movies that sell a lot are these ones that stoke desire. So if one has, or tend to anyway, if one has a job in which one is trying to stoke people's desire for products, for services, trying to make them feel afraid if they don't have it, trying to make them feel like their life will be more complete or better if they do have it, and it's actually not true. It's not a necessary product. One is just trying to stoke these desires in people, or these fears, or even hatred can sell products. in order to make money, this is a wrong means of livelihood. It's a way of livelihood that, although one may not be breaking the precepts, it will be an obstacle to one's progress. So one wants to carve away these more subtle intentions after that. After one has made the rough shape of the block, then one wants to refine it further. Maybe start making the arms, the legs of the figure, making the head, so you can see the basic outline. This is, taking these kind of unwholesome desires that one knows are unwholesome, that are not recommended by the Buddha, but don't break the 5 precepts, especially in ways that they apply to one's lifestyle and one's livelihood, like things that one is doing all the time, like 6, 7, 8 hours a day, that are generally, not wholesome. One can refine these things afterwards. So once one has done this, and these, one can do all these at once. It's not like, one has to wait until one has kept the 5 precepts to start, reining in one's errant ways of living. But in any event, once, as a general progression in terms of refinement, the next level up would be something like the Buddha has recommended very strongly to lay people, the keeping of the 8 precepts once a week. So if one really wants to continue with one's practice, then one can try to keep these 8 precepts once a week, these kind of renunciant precepts. And what that will actually do is it will show a lot of areas in one's life where one is attached to the world. It's a practice that can be very powerful, but that can seem understated. Just once a week, not eating, only eating during the first part of the day, not engaging in entertainment. One is like a brother or sister to one's partner for that day. Or one is sleeping on a low bed. All of these things, even if one is not engaging in entertainment, even if one does these things once a week, it weakens the fabric of the way in which these things interact and enmesh to basically form this very strong web of desire and perceptions in one's life, like one's desire for food, one's ability to eat food in the evening. That's something that actually gives like the body a certain amount of mass, a certain amount of weight. If one cuts it back, then one loses weight, and actually one will become less attractive to members of the opposite sex. And this in and of itself pulls one back from that type of sensuality, even the sensuality of like flirting or whatever it might be. Sleeping on a low bed, that has the advantage that basically if you're living in a palace and you sleep on the floor, it doesn't really matter. Like what, it's an unusually powerful practice in that the dwelling that you're in starts to matter a lot less if you're sleeping on the floor. There's quite a strange amount of like sensuality and pleasure that one derives from sleep and sleeping in comfortable, elevated places. When one cuts that off, that pulls one's mind back to a large degree, or can help quite a lot to pull one's mind back from the attachment to lovely dwellings or lovely things in the world in general. And the other ones also have obvious benefits. If one keeps the brahmacharya one day of the week, then obviously that has benefits in terms of one's reliance or one's this very strong attachments that one develops to one's partner or to other people. These attachments can develop a lot through this through intimate relationships. So in pulling one's mind back from these things once a week, then it creates space in the mind in which one can develop one's meditation practice further. And the more that one relies on one's meditation practice, the more of a refinement it is in terms of the amount of wholesomeness that one has. Relying on one's meditation practice to make one happy does not require the doing of anything evil. In fact, the doing of evil things gets in the way. You can't say that for sensuality. External sensual things, one can do very evil things and become very successful in terms of gaining external sensual pleasures. So if one can keep these 8 precepts once a week, then this is another level up in terms of refining the block of wood. Okay, now I start to chisel in clothes, or what do you call it? Whittle in clothes with your knife or whatever more fine tools you have. You can maybe see the shape of the face, the nose. You can see maybe the shoes or whatever the person is wearing. So what one wants to do after that, or in terms of refinement, one can do this anytime, is that basically there's a kind of intuitive sense of when the next thing one needs to let go is. What is the next thing in one's life that one needs to change? And for lay people, this is a lot trickier, a much more tricky question than it is for monks, because monks generally have this, we have the 227 rules, and the Buddha has basically standardized the monastic life to make it the optimum for striving for nibbana. For lay people, it's much more varied in terms of just about everything. So it requires quite a lot of use of intuition and wisdom to determine what is the next thing that's blocking my meditation progress. And of course, one of the most helpful things in this case is if one already has a meditation practice going. When one's renunciations, when one's practice is stabilized, then one can sometimes notice when one is hitting a wall in one's practice. And one can investigate that. What is it that's causing me to hit this wall? Sometimes one can just ask the question, why am I hitting this wall? And the answer may sometimes come to one, it's because of this. Or one may have an intuitive sense of something that one is really strongly attached to and doesn't want to let go. And the tricky thing about these things is that they're usually things where like an intuition will come up and be like, okay, this is something that, you need to let go, you need to change. The intuition will come up, and then one will get scared, or one won't want to see it, and one will put it away. And then it'll disappear, and it'll seem as if that thing is totally innocuous, it's not a big deal, that was just something small and there's no need to look at it. But actually what one needs to do to refine one's practice further is to renounce, to give up whatever it was that intuition was pointing to. It could be, at this point it can get a little bit more serious in terms of renunciation, because one may notice things that are one considered fundamental in one's lay life, and one realizes that to progress further, one has to give that up. One has to change that. So this can be a bit more like starting to, draw in the eyebrows, whittle in the eyebrows, whittle in the shape of the cheekbones, whittle in the teeth. You can definitely see what the figure is. And this process of refinement can continue for a lay person, and essentially what happens is that there's only one path to Nibbana, and it's the Noble Eightfold Path, and it's the same principles for both a lay person and a monk. So the further that a lay person progresses on this path, the more their life starts to look like the life of a monk. Although, because of the variables in a lay person's life, it won't be exactly the same. But it will look more like that, and you can see where the principles apply. In the Buddha's time, almost all the lay people who were non-returners, basically all of them who were non-returners, they were called householders clothed in white. And so they essentially became anagarikas within their marriage. They would, like a husband and wife, would live together, and they would keep the 8 precepts all the time. So they would be living in their house as anagarikas, so they would have become celibate. So at that point, their life starts to look quite a lot like a monastic life. So a lot of it depends on the person individually. What is the next thing that's best for them to renounce? And this is quite an individual matter. So it requires this use of intuition, and what is it that's blocking my meditation progress? It requires this use of wisdom, this kind of investigation. Okay, if I let this go, does my meditation improve? Do things open up? Is this the right way to let it go? Is it the right time to let it go? How can I do this? And it's different for each person. But the important thing is that one of the important things is that this practice of moving forward in the Buddha's teachings is a practice of basically continual renunciation. One lets go of one's attachment to things externally in order to have the space, basically, to develop a refuge inside, to develop an internal refuge. So the process of refining what habits one needs to let go of, what habits one needs to change. It can be like this, like whittling a block. One generally wants to focus on the grossest ones first, and then once those are gone, then one can look to more detail at the next level. But it doesn't always have to be that way. One can try to do them all at once. But generally, one will get a better sense of what the next step of refinement is once one has stabilized, once one has developed into a lifestyle the practices that one already has, the precepts that one has already become skilled in keeping, and the levels of renunciation that one has already become used to. And they become part of one's lifestyle, part of one's way of living in the world, so that one doesn't have to think about them so much. It's almost like a second nature. So in this way, one can refine the block of wood further and further until it starts to take shape. And this is something that each person can know for themselves. And of course, each carving, although you may be carving a person, looks a little bit different, depends on who carves it and what their ideas of the carving are. But the principles there are the same. So one can use one's intuition, one can use one's wisdom to refine one's life further and further as a lay person to move forward on the path to Nibbana. Okay, so I think leave that for reflection, and wishing everybody all the blessings of Dhamma practice.